Dear friends, the recent speech of Pope Francis at Lisbon on the World Youth Day 2023 has a lot of lessons for us, especially religious priests, religious nuns and brothers, heads of institutions, leaders, missionaries, and servants of people. His speech was so candid, in my opinion, very open, challenging, and above all, so inspiring for all of us. It's not only his one speech, but also his entire papacy and his leadership has a lot to teach us. First of all, let us look at his speech in Lisbon. In Lisbon, he says, I dream of a Europe, the heart of the West, which employs its immense talents to settling conflicts and lighting lamps of hope. A Europe capable of recovering its youthful heart, looking to the greatness of the whole and beyond its immediate needs. A Europe inclusive of peoples and persons, without chasing after ideologies and forms of ideological colonization. He says, borders are not as boundaries that separate. He began his first speech of his apostolic journey to Lisbon, to Portugal, taking his cue from the image of the ocean. That image is so impressive. He says, this image of the ocean is in the heart of every Portuguese person. He says the ocean does not merely link peoples and countries, but lands and continents. It reminds us of the importance of the whole, to think of borders, places of contact, not as boundaries that separate. It can therefore suggest a different path from that followed in our divided world, incapable of confronting together what threatens us all, including planetary injustice, wars, climate, and migration crisis. He says, where are you sailing, Europe and the West? With the discarding of the elderly, walls of barbed wire, massive numbers of deaths at sea, and empty cradles. Where are you sailing if before life's ills you offer hasty but mistaken remedies, like easy access to death, a convenient answer that seems sweet, but is in fact more bitter than the waters of the sea. Young people from around the world who long for unity, peace, and fraternity urge us to make their good dreams come true. They are taking to the streets, not to cry out in anger, but to share the hope of the gospel. Political life is challenged to see itself as a generator of life and concern for others. It is called to show foresight by investing in the future, in families and in children, and by promoting intergenerational covenants that do not cancel the past, but forge bonds between young and old. With deep love for Europe and in the spirit of dialogue that distinguishes this continent, we might ask her, where are you sailing? If you are not showing the world paths of peace, creative ways for bringing an end to the war in Ukraine and to the many other conflicts causing so much bloodshed. When we think of the influential leaders of our time, few names stand out as much as Pope Francis. Because of this one speech in Portugal on the World Youth Day 2023, it stands as a testament to his consistent message as Pope, as the leader of the world. Now, after hearing his speech, I was looking at myself and looking at the religious of our times, the leaders. Perhaps those who seek for an inspiration, Pope is there to give us a blueprint of what a leadership means. I can give you 10 invaluable lessons from Pope, from his teachings, from his speech on the World Youth Day, as well as his papacy, looking at the person of Pope Francis. Perhaps this will help us in our organizations, congregations, parishes, service centers, churches, and institutions. The first point we can look at Pope Francis is that he embraces humility. Pope Francis is known for his humble nature. He chose simplicity over extravagance, symbolizing a dedication to his cause. And what can we learn from him? We religious leaders, religious people must learn a lesson from him. We can promote a culture of humility where leadership is approachable, encourages open communication, and is willing to learn from everyone, regardless of rank and positions in the church. The second is that Pope Francis fostered inclusivity. In Portugal, Pope Francis spoke extensively about welcoming all, irrespective of their background, their religion, their cultures, their ethnicity, their gender, their language, and regions. We must welcome everyone. We also must implement diversity and inclusion programs. We must be people of inclusiveness, not exclusive. The third point is Pope Francis serves others. Pope Francis teaches that leadership is about service to others. Through his life, through his teachings, he shows us a model of service. And we religious can learn from him, encourage mentorship and community service. We need to be people of service, create opportunities for all to give back and support one another, encourage the young and support the older ones. Let us have an attitude of service. Let that be our identity as religious. The fourth point is listen actively. Pope Francis values the voices of the youth, providing that everyone has something valuable to say. Listen to them. And what is the lesson for us as religious? We need to introduce feedback mechanisms and open forums. Prioritize active listening in mission. Today, when we look around the world, attentive listening is missing in our daily life. And the fifth point is Pope Francis insists us to prioritize the environment, environmental concerns, ecological concerns. And he says, we are here as stewards, environmental stewardship. Pope Francis champions it. And what is the lesson for us? Launch a lot of ecological initiatives, encourage sustainable practices and environmental and ecological concerns around us in our lives. Let us practice it in our own lives rather than simply preaching. The sixth point from Pope Francis we can learn is his leadership is always encourage authenticity, like Jesus. Authenticity is key to genuine connections, and that is a sentiment echoed by Pope Francis. In his speech in Lisbon, he explained, he expressed, he manifested that concern, that authenticity. And we religious must learn from him. We can promote freedom for all members of the community so that we can be responsible to the mission. They can be responsible to the mission entrusted to them. Celebrate uniqueness and authenticity by promoting internal communications. The seventh point Pope Francis is asking us through his life is promote peace and reconciliation. In his speeches, Pope Francis consistently advocates for peace and unity. And you heard in Lisbon on World Youth Day, he spoke about peace and reconciliation, especially going beyond the boundaries, as focusing on Europe. And what is the lesson for us, religious? Mediate conflicts effectively through dialogue and promote a harmonious spiritual environment. Wherever we are, we can mediate conflicts. Conflict resolution is very much needed today. We are here to solve problems and not to create problems. The eighth point from Pope Francis we can learn is nurture always hope and positivity. Pope Francis asks us to remain hopeful even in adversity. In the midst of darkness, let us be able to see light shining. Religious are supposed to be hopeful people. Even in the midst of problems, they must see God's hand working tirelessly. God is always working for the well-being of all. Foster a positive environment where optimism is celebrated and where support is readily available. The ninth lesson from Pope Francis is that value continual learning. Pope Francis believes in the power of continuous learning and growth. We religious must work for spiritual and professional development in our areas of work. And finally, the 10th point is demonstrate moral courage. You heard just now, I started with the speech, some parts of the speech of Pope Francis. He has the moral courage to critically look at the world and point out the wrongs. Pope Francis does not shy away from taking a stand on global issues. Perhaps it's a lesson for us as religious. We need to be prophets of our times. Highlight moral courage as a valued leadership trait. In conclusion, my dear brothers and sisters, friends, Pope Francis's leadership style transcends boundaries and offers a universal message that resonates with many. As religious, we are all leaders in one way or the other. As leaders, we hold the power to transform these lessons into actionable strategies, fostering fellow religious and our people. Let's follow the valuable traits of Pope Francis that mirror these admirable, valuable uh, leadership traits. Let's follow these 10 points from Pope Francis to enrich, to enhance, to work for the well being of all. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.